Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and today, as we do this time each month, but Joe, we're not going to do it next month because we're going to be in Israel, we have the Joe Newby Hour. Joe is the bloggerator, the bloginator of the conservativefiringline.com and author of the book Banned, How Facebook is Promoting, Protecting, Advancing Islamic Jihad. It is an expose that will shock you, and with all the media play about Facebook, it is even more relevant today than it has been even at its writing. Joe, welcome to the Joe Newby Hour.
Good morning, Eric. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Things are just crazy in America.
Absolutely. Beyond crazy.
Let me just ask you this question. What do we really know about Chuck Schumer?
He's a Democrat and he's from New York. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all you need to know.
I have never seen partisanship for the sake of partisanship to the detriment of this country. He should be tarred and feathered for his anti-American principles that stand against everything that will and has proven under the Reagan administration. Listen, this game plan is a Reagan game plan.
Right.
This is not a Donald Trump game plan. The
Right.
names have been changed to protect the innocent, but
Yeah, pretty much.
But this is right out of Ronald Reagan's playbook, which was brilliant.
Right.
It had its issues, it had its problems. There's no perfect
Sure.
presidency, but when you took the quagmire that the nation was in, with rotten peanuts, Billy Beer, and a president who didn't speak English as far as I was concerned, and I lived in Atlanta,
Right.
to President Donald Trump that is taking over for a president that didn't speak English the way I understand English spoken.
Well, I tell you what, Chuck Schumer, he's in a class all by himself, Eric, as far as I'm concerned. I remember watching this guy talking gun control back when he was in the House of Representatives. And I wasn't really into politics way back then. Yeah, a little bit, but not like I am now. And I tell you what, he disgusted me even back then. We're talking mid-'80s. This guy just royally ticked me off. And I thought to myself, I remember thinking to myself, if this guy gets reelected, there's seriously something wrong with the folks up there in New York. Well, not only did he get reelected, but he ended up getting elected to the Senate, and he's still there. And just recently, I did a post on this early this morning. Mm-hmm. Just recently, he came out and said that, if the federal government doesn't pay for protection in the city of New York, that Mayor Comrade de Blasio should not protect the first family. We're talking about not just the president, but we're talking about his wife, his 10, 11-year-old son, Barron, for crying out loud. And here you have the Senate minority leader, not just some ragtag, plopping down the street, marijuana smoking Democrat. We're talking about the Senate minority leader here saying, the city of New York should put the Trump family in danger unless the federal government ponies up some money. I mean, if that's not extortion, Eric, I don't know what is.
This whole idea of the truly Marxist left, if it's not fascism, it's Marxism. If it's not Marxism, it's some form of lunacy. that goes against everything that's good for the country. If it's not stamped Democratic Party, it's not worthwhile.
Exactly. And the biggest problem that we have is that with a few, a few notable exceptions, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, and a few others, Rand Paul, with very few exceptions, we don't really have any Republicans elected to office that are willing to stand up and say, hey, enough of this nonsense.
Well, you are absolutely correct. When we were talking off air before we went on camera, there were a couple of points that you wanted to make in regards to this threat that came out of a professor out of
Fresno State, or the University of California at Fresno, yeah.
Right.
A fellow by the name of Lars Myshak. He's a history teacher, hails from Germany, I believe, and this guy went to the Johns Hopkins University, a few other places. He's a PhD. Back in February, he put out a tweet and said that for the good of democracy, Donald Trump must hang, and he must hang high. Well, that caught the attention of Breitbart. They did a post on it, which drew the attention of the Fresno Bee, which did an article. Their article wasn't so much concerned about what Myshak had written. Their article was more concerned, it seemed, with the fact that Breitbart is the one who that exposed it. Well, a few other sites picked it up, and they picked up on this one tweet that Mr. Myshak had put out, which was offensive enough in and of itself. I started digging through his Twitter feed myself to see what was there, and what was there, Eric, shocked me beyond description. He had one picture. He had a picture of a bullet, okay, and it was captioned, "The cure for racism if administered to the cranium." Now, I don't know about you, Eric, but I don't think you need to be an MIT-educated rocket scientist to get the gist of what he's talking about. Throughout his Twitter feed, Trump supporters are Russian agents, essentially. Trump supporters are racist. Trump supporters are Nazis. They're fascists. On and on and on and on and on it goes. He attacked Christianity. He attacked the Constitution. He put out rhetoric that was the same kind of rhetoric that one would expect from this so-called anti-fascist group, Antifa. And so, yeah, he caught a lot of flack over it, a tremendous amount of flack. I did a post on it. Several other people did a post on it. I put up posts showing some of his more egregious tweets. Eric, I'm telling you, to think that this is the kind of thing put up by a PhD. Again, right. It's like I told the good folks down there in Fresno. I was on one of their Me TV or We TV or whatever you call it, radio programs, talking to one of their television personalities. It's not like we're talking about some random leftist living in his mother's basement, floating down the streets of Fresno, putting this stuff out. If that was the case, we could pretty much ignore it and knock it up, maybe to bad parenting or bad schooling or something, and ignore it. No, this is a PhD, a college teacher who has control over young, impressionable minds who don't know any better, have never been exposed probably to the world, doesn't know the difference between a communist or a fascist, and has never, probably been outside the People's Republic of California, okay? So here he is, and he wants us all to believe that, oh, my political views never make it into my classroom. I'm thinking baloney. I went through his Twitter feed all the way back to just after the election. And there was one tweet in there where he said something to somebody, presumably one of his former students, where he's talking about, if you ever miss, my anti-fascist tirades, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, this is nonsense. Why are the people in the state of California paying this guy's salary? What is he doing in that classroom? So I took it a step further, Eric. I put up a change.org petition because, quite frankly, I am sick and tired of these leftist professors indoctrinating our kids. I had liberal teachers in college when I went to college, and that wasn't all that long ago, okay? I had some left-wing teachers, but you know what? I liked them. I respected them. They were respectful to me. They respected my opinions. We had some fantastic discussions. It was nothing like what it is now. Today, if you have a view on campus that is somewhere to the right of Joseph Stalin, you're toast in a lot of these classes. You're toast in a lot of these colleges.
I went to a very large university, Penn State. 55,000 students on campus.
Right.
And here I am, 65 years old, thinking back to 1969. And I can tell you, Frank Sansone and John Chisholm, sociology and political science professors. Right. I had them for all the years. Whatever course they taught, I took.
Right.
The classes were this way. Take your books and throw them on the floor. Stand up and defend your position. I don't care what it is. Defend it. Make your case and defend it.
Exactly.
And they would debate, and they would dialogue. And what would happen is, it was a sculptor, a hammer and a chisel. And where you had rough edges, they knocked off the little rough edges so that your argument could be smooth.
Right.
Not whether or not they agreed with your position or they were trying to formulate your position. They were trying to perfect your ability to cohesively present your position, knowing that then, in 1969, it was make love, not war. Today,
I remember that.
Today, in 2017, it's Constitution, conservative biblical values. I'm the same arguer as I was in 1969.
Right.
The message changes, but the cohesiveness, the smoothness, the polish, the clarity is the same, because that's how I was formed. Right. Not on how to think, but how to present what I thought.
Well, and it's even more basic than that. You're absolutely right. I remember '69. I was a young man in school. I remember '69. Not college. I wasn't quite that that old yet. But I remember debating other kids in high school. I was in high school back then. I remember debating other kids in high school and having discussions with teachers back then. And even when I went to college, Eric, back in the early 2000s. Of course, by then I had spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. I had been around a bit, and I knew something about something, okay? And I had a sociology teacher complained about George W. Bush not signing the Kyoto Global Warming Accord. And I thought, I had to raise my hand, being the kind of guy I am. I'm saying, excuse me, doctor, but you do know that the president doesn't ratify treaties, right? I'm just throwing this out, basic civics, right? That I learned in junior high school. And I thought from that moment on, I thought my goose was cooked in that course. I thought, there goes my 4-0, I'm done. But no, she was very fair. She said, oh, is that okay? Well, maybe you're right. And we moved on, and fortunately my 4-0 survived the course, and we moved on. But today it's something totally different, Eric. They don't teach kids how to think. That, like what you were describing. They don't teach kids how to look at two different sides of the coin and make a case either way. See, when I went to school, and probably when you went to school, we were taught okay, here's the case, here's what you have to defend, now you defend it. And you had to learn,
Right.
even if it was something that went against your grain, you still had to learn how to present that argument. Well, that's not what's happening today. Today, it's you will think like me or we'll shut you down.
You know,
And,
I grew up in an old world environment. Eastern Europeans coming to this country,
right,
Jewish, maintained the Jewish teaching style in synagogue.
right,
And one of the earliest lessons that I ever learned when I sat with a rabbi being trained was, if you and I agree on everything, neither one of us has learned anything.
exactly, exactly. And what we're seeing this kind of thing happening in Berkeley, with Ann Coulter, with what happened to Milo or Milo Yiannopoulos, however you pronounce his name, Gavin McInnes
Even his
over
mother,
at
even his mother doesn't know how to pronounce it.
more than likely, God bless them. But at least they're out there, trying to put forward the conservative case. But yet you have a state-funded school
Right.
that has gone out of their way to see to it that they can't speak on campus. And what they're doing is they're using the old, well, we can't guarantee your safety defense, which, as you and I both know, is something called a heckler's veto, which is not only illegal, it's unconstitutional.
Right.
And the Young Americas Foundation and the Berkeley College Republicans have filed a lawsuit against the school and against the University of California system, including Janet Napolitano, for violating Ann Coulter's First Amendment right to free speech, which I think is a good thing, personally. Berkeley, I remember back in the late 60s, like you were talking about, I remember, speaking with liberals, students in high school and liberal teachers, and they would all say the same thing. Well, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'll defend your right to say it.
Of course. This is something that we're seeing coming out of academia. And it concerns me because they are shaping the mind, and they're shaping the mind in a way that will breed. Let me kind of rephrase this. In the 60s, we did not agree with the United States presence in Vietnam.
Right.
We didn't agree with it for several reasons. First of all, friends of ours were going over there and dying.
Right.
It was personal.
Right.
Second of all, we were, and I don't, in my particular case, my father did not have a high school education. He didn't come from a place that did. So I was more educated, was more aware, knew of the French bailout of Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, what they got themselves into, and what we went to get them out of. We came from a position of, we wanted to be non-violent protest, and it remained non-violent until Kent State. Now, I grew up in Pittsburgh. Allison Krauss, who died at Penn State, was someone who grew up in my community, in the Jewish community in Pittsburgh. So now it becomes even more personal. When tear gas was introduced, it wasn't because we introduced it, it was because it was introduced. How do you control people? We learned a lot of lessons about controlling people. We wanted an audience, and we weren't given an audience. That was our frustration, is that no one would listen to our argument. We were of an age where I could go to Vietnam and be killed, but I couldn't buy a beer and I could not vote.
I remember those days well. Exactly.
I could die. I could die in the service of my country, but I couldn't vote for my president.
Exactly.
I could die in the service of my country, but I couldn't drink a beer. And so we were frustrated. However, we did not follow anyone blindly, even within our own ranks. You had SDS.
Yeah, I remember them.
You had the Black Panthers.
Yep.
You had the White Panthers.
Right.
You had from Bill Ayers to Malcolm X to Angela Davis to Abby Hoffman to you had them all over the place.
Sure did.
And yes, take over the building. Don't burn the building down. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. Go march on Washington, but please don't tear it up. It's a beautiful park.
Don't tear it down.
You know, go have a smoke-in. Who, and I'm not justifying promoting marijuana, but when was the last time a bunch of stoners got into a brawl?
Well, I tell you, my argument back then was a little bit different. My argument, I was more upset with the fact that that our rules of engagement simply didn't make sense. I was hearing stuff from guys coming back that just blew me away. My argument was, you know what, if we're going to be there, let's go to win, let's go in, let's do the job, and let's come home. You know, there was no reason in my mind, just like today, there's no reason we should be stuck in these quagmires in the Middle East. You know, we've got the most powerful military in the world. Why don't we go in, do the job, get it done, win, then come home? And that was my argument back then as well. We've got these you know, this podunk country. You got to be kidding me that with our military, with the power that we could field, that we could not defeat the North Vietnamese. Go in, you know, like you know, Patton might say, you know, go through them like, you know, stuff through a goose, do the job, get it done, and come home. That was essentially my argument. But what we've got happening now, Eric, is 10 times worse, and it's been exacerbated, I think, because of the fact that we have had 8 years of a president who became what I call the Lord of the Mobs. When Occupy Wall Street hit the streets, what did Barack Obama do? He did absolutely nothing.
Right.
When all of these, I guess you call them anarchist groups, the Black Bloc and what have you, Black Bloc in Seattle, they come out every year, three times a year, and now it's Antifa. Every time these people hit the streets, burning, looting, blowing things up, threatening people, beating people up, what did Barack Obama, what did the administration do? They did worse than nothing, Eric. Barack Obama actually went out and told Occupy Wall Street, you're the reason I'm doing this.
Right.
You're the reason I ran for president. I'm like, what? You've got to be kidding me. And so now we're at a point where groups like, you know, Antifa, this so-called, you know, hashtag resistance nonsense, they now feel empowered to be able to go out and do whatever they want. They feel like they have carte blanche to do whatever they want, cause whatever mayhem they want, attack people at random, and essentially get their way through violence. You've got Antifa, for example, going out. They went out in one Florida college and were actually teaching college students literally how to beat up on Republicans. You had another Antifa group warning that, hey, even your kids aren't off limits. You've got Democrats in Congress, elected Democrats, saying that what they saw in Berkeley with Antifa was a beautiful thing and we need to see more of it. Are you kidding me? So now you've got Antifa throwing, you know, explosive devices, rocks, bricks. There was even a teacher who supposedly beat up on a Trump supporter with a real heavy bike lock, slashed his head open. That made headlines for quite a while. Who knows what's happening with him? And then you have characters like Lars Myshak out of Fresno State.
Right.
There was about maybe, put your fingers about a 32nd of an inch apart, Eric. That's about the distance between his rhetoric and Antifa's actions. That's how close they are. And so when students see this, now mind you, Twitter is a public space unless you purposefully make your Twitter feed private.
Right.
Anybody on Twitter, anybody on the internet can look at your Twitter feed and see what you're saying, what you're putting out there. This guy had been on Twitter since 2013, and he tried to make the argument that, well, I was only tweeting to a few people. Well, excuse me, again, this is a guy with a PhD.
Right.
I'm supposed to believe he doesn't have enough on the ball to know that his tweets can be seen by anybody on the internet. Hello? So what does the California State College there do? Get this, Eric. They put him on paid leave. First they said,
paid leave. So you make a threat, a death threat against the president. You incite people to hang him in effigy, and you basically give them an instruction manual as to how to come against the President of the United States, and he's put on paid leave.
That's right. And it got worse, Eric. I mean, if you had seen this guy, I did a couple posts where I put in some of his tweets, quite a few of his tweets, and you can't see the tweet, but you can still see the text of the tweets.
Right.
One of them, Eric, in one of those tweets, Eric, this guy actually suggested punching Democrats in the face for suggesting working with Donald Trump to, for the sake of national unity. He's talking about, these people deserve a punch in the face. Wait a minute, what?
This is the same kind of rhetoric that came out during the campaign, where Donald Trump and this violence and all this, and trying to dovetail on that. We're talking with Joe Newby, the bloginator at conservativefiringline.com, author of the book Banned, How Facebook Enables Militant Jihad. And in his own right, Joe is a staunch, straight-up opinionator, straight shooter. I believe gives you a clear view of what's going on. You should check him out at conservativefiringline.com. When we come back, we're going to talk about the elections in France. We're going to talk about the Islamization of America. We're going to talk about this omnibus, which is the first piece of budgetary material coming out of this new administration that looks just like what Barack Obama was asking for on his way out. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Joe Newby for the Joe Newby Hour. This is Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation Ministries, and your host for Revealing the Truth right here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network. I'm coming to you today with a very special offer from one of our very prominent guests, Dr. Carl Gallups. For your tax-deductible contribution of $30 or more, Pastor Carl Gallups will send you a signed copy of his new best-selling book, When the Lion Roars. In this book, you will discover what the Bible really says about the unprecedented demonic outpouring of the last days, the spirit of the days of Noah, the connection of technology and prophecy fulfillment, the spirit of Sodom and Gomorrah, apostasy in the last days church, why Turkey is central to last days prophecy, why Israel is the centerpiece of end-time prophecy, the historical truth about Islam and ISIS, the Shemitah, the mystery of 666, and how Christians and the church should respond to these prophetic times. We are living in intense but exciting times. We're living in prophetically unprecedented times. Be on guard, prepare your heart and mind, make certain you have a biblically balanced understanding of our generation. Be ready with wisdom and perspective. We have been raised up for such a time as this. The lion of God's prophetic word is roaring. Do you hear its call? Send your check payable to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242.
Hi, I'm Angela Waite, and I just finished my interview on Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. I hope that in some way you will be touched by my story and that you will receive the healing you so desperately desire. I would like to share my story with you and send you a personalized signed copy of my book, Bomb Pops, Blow Dryers, and Butterfly Kisses, for your tax-deductible gift of $25 or more to Igniting a Nation, Inc. I will personally send you my book along with a note of encouragement as you take this journey with me. You will not only be supporting the work of Igniting a Nation, but all the proceeds that I receive from book sales goes to support Ramsey's Rescue, which targets the physical and spiritual care of the little ones who have been abandoned. It is the goal of this ministry to provide food, clothing, education, medical, a safe and loving home, and hope. Please help support both ministries with your gift and make a difference in so many lives today. Send your check payable to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. May the Lord bless you for your generosity and support.
This is the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of Revealing the Truth, right here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network, inviting you to join me every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for our Prophecy in the News classes. Each week I take the headlines from around the world that have a biblical connection and present them in a way that brings the news and the Bible to life. There are over 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, and there are so few classes available to see how they connect with world events. We cover everything from Islamic terrorism to the changing relationships between Russia, Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Israel. Prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes, and to many, it is complicated and hard to understand. In just 1 hour each week, you'll be given the tools and the biblical connection to world events. With so much going on, and so few reliable sources of news, I encourage you to join me every Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at St. Mark United Methodist Church in Northport, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Beechwood Baptist Church in Mount Olive, and every Thursday night at 7 p.m. at Mountain Chapel United Methodist Church in Vestavia. If you want to make sense out of what's happened in the world around you, this is the class for you. All are welcome. Times and location addresses can be found on our website at ianbn.com. I hope to see you there. Shalom. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we are talking to Joe Newby, who is our co-host for the Joe Newby Hour, author of Banned. An expose on Facebook. You need to get a copy of it. You can get it through the ignitinganation.com website of Books and Media. You can get it at your Amazon store. You can get it in Kindle. It is from our friends at World Ahead Press, WND, and it is quite a read. You'd be shocked and amazed at what goes on Facebook. Joe, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. Well, we had the first 30 minutes of a very rich diet on the liberal agenda of make more noise, cause more distraction, stifle the First Amendment rights of anybody that has a message different than yours. And God bless America for doing it. The chaos which comes out of the left, and I heard their chairman, this was stunning the other night as he went off with a lot of explicatives that says that the top spokesperson for the one of the two largest parties, political parties in America, has to resort to a screaming, shouting, profanity-riddled presentation in order to represent what they call a better way? I was told that if you have to use those kind of words, that's a sign that you are either uneducated, lazy, or just a potty mouth fool. What's going on there?
I agree. Well, you know what, the profanity and all that really is nothing new with this crowd. It's just they're becoming much more open, much more public, and it's becoming much more mainstream. And the rhetoric that you're hearing from that side of the political aisle, unfortunately. I remember covering the 2010 midterm elections, and I was seeing it there as well, and it blew my mind, Eric, that we have a political party that feels that it has to resort to that kind of rhetoric. And if you want to know why the Democratic Party has lost something like 1,500 elections across the country, not just Congress or Senate, but also at state level, state houses, local level, municipal level. This is part of the reason why, because you have a political party that is so married to a radical ideology that this is the only way they feel that they can make their voices heard. You know, it's almost like, you know, if we hold our breath long enough and stomp our feet hard enough and yell and scream and our face turns blue, then maybe people will listen to us. Well, sorry, you know, it's like a good friend of mine once said, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig, you know, and that's essentially what you have here. No matter how they dress it up, no matter what they do, there's no way that they can make socialism, Marxism, whatever kind of ism you want to call it, look good. Because those of us who are informed know that these policies don't work. We've had 8 years of it, and we know that it doesn't work. We had 8 years of it with Bill Clinton. We know this stuff doesn't work. So all of their, you know, screaming and jumping up and down and hollering, it isn't going to dress it up enough to make people want to buy into it. And now you've got Tom Perez, the new head of the DNC, who has made it, you know, very clear that in order to be a Democrat, you have to be pro-abortion. Period. You cannot be a pro-life Democrat. You know, and that's a shame, quite frankly. I mean, I remember, and you probably do too as well, Eric, guys like Zell Miller, you know, a senator from, where was he from? Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. I'm sorry. I remember him from way back. And I didn't agree with everything the man said, but you know what? I respected the man.
Yes.
I respected him because he had, you know, he was pro-life. He had Christian ideology going for him. He was a good man. I mean, you could disagree with some of his policy positions,
right?
But at the core of it, he was a good man. And there were a lot of good people like that in the Democrat Party. Not anymore. Those people are gone. The Zell Millers, you know, the Scoop Jacksons, right, the Harry S. Trumans, they're gone. Forget that. They're gone. This is a whole different Democrat Party now.
It's completely different. Give me your take on what's going on with North Korea, what you see happening. Something has to happen.
Something has to happen, and something will. Kim Jong-un has been rattling his sabers with the United States, you know, from the very beginning.
Of course.
It's one of the ways that he uses, one of the tools that he uses to keep his people on his side. He thinks that if he can jump up and down and hoot and holler loud enough and make these crazy claims, that his people will continue to follow him. And of course they do. They have no choice. If they disagree, they're killed or they're put in prison. So they have really no choice.
Right.
But ultimately, what I'm seeing come out of North Korea, have you ever noticed that every time they launch a missile, it fails? I think they had one here recently, just barely got off a launch pad and it failed. Now, there is a danger, a very real serious danger, that he could put some kind of weapon of mass destruction, whether it be a nuke, small nuclear weapon, or a chemical device, and possibly hit South Korea or possibly hit Japan.
Right.
There are some very serious concerns there. And it looks like he wants war. And, the Chinese are trying to tell. In fact, not too long ago, the Chinese told Kim Jong-un, you better knock this off because, you're dealing with Donald Trump. This is a different America. This is a different administration. You keep doing this stuff, and, this guy's going to do something back. I hope and pray that nothing happens, but I'm concerned that this little tin-pot dictator is going to do something, make the wrong move, and he's going to seriously regret it.
Now, is this something for us to respond to, or is this something that China needs to respond to?
I think it should be a concerted effort, quite frankly. President Trump has made it clear that he's working with the Chinese president and the Chinese government. The Chinese have already warned Kim Jong-un, like I said before, they've already warned the North Koreans that they better knock this stuff off because Trump means it. He's no Obama. Right. He means it. We've got warships heading in the area. I have read that the Japanese have warships that are coming alongside of ours. Of course, the South Koreans are on our side. I think Russia would probably not think too kindly of a nuclear-armed Kim Jong-un. I don't know if they'll come in on our side or not, but I get the feeling that North Korea is going to find itself isolated, cut off, and pretty much is going to be fighting on multiple fronts, and they won't win.
We see it will be very interesting because I find this a foreshadowing of Iran.
Yeah.
How we respond to this threat will set the precedent in the region for how we respond to Iran. Iran's on the verge of having the same capability. Their rhetoric is the same: death to America, death to the great Satan, to the little Satan.
Sure.
We will. You say or do one thing against us, we're going to blow you out. We're going to destroy you. Well,
right.
North Korea, we know they're troublesome. Iran, we know that they have. We gave them money.
Yeah.
We gave them nuclear capability. We wrote an agreement that said, here's the facilities you have to test. All these other facilities we're just going to pretend don't exist, which is where you're really developing your nuclear capabilities.
Right.
But how we handle this. Now, I find that Tillerson is the opposite of Lurch, who was in the role, and all he would do was go from country to country and go, "You rang," as Lurch did on the show. He looked like him, he acted like him, and he responded like him.
Pretty much.
Now we have Tillerson that's used to dealing with Middle Eastern oil sheikhs, countries where ExxonMobil was looking to establish a presence. He's got that high level, and when you listen to him talk, you don't hear the Harvard, Oxford, polished prose.
Right.
You hear a gruff oil rigger guy who's come up, knows his stuff, knows how to make stuff happen, deals with people with dirty hands, deals with equipment that's messy, deals with people. He's not he's certainly boardroom capable and competent, but
Oh,
he's a man
absolutely.
who's had his sleeves rolled up, and he's done the job. And I found him to be incredibly effective.
As have I so far,
Yeah,
yes.
very, very, very impressed with that. Uh, I think we've done a disservice to the presidency with this 100-day milestone. I think it was motivational to the Democrats to stall for 100 days so that they could have a benchmark of success in blocking.
Right.
But it's meaningless, it's contrite, it's foolish, it's just kind of, I don't think it'll have any impact in the future. I think it's done. It's
I tend to agree. I mean, it's been around for so long. Oh, the first 100 days, the first 100 days of this, first 100 days of that, and so that we've gotten so used to these kinds of things, and it's all media driven. It's all media generated, and I agree with you 100%. It's totally arbitrary. There's absolutely no reason for it in my mind. And it has nothing to do with a long-term goal. And that's what we should be focusing on, in my view, Eric, is a long-term goal.
well, no question about it. No question about it. France,
Mm-hmm.
French elections. What are your thoughts about the state of Europe, the state of the EU, Turkey? What's happening and why?
Well, I think the EU. You got to remember, the EU is not something that was organic. In other words, the European people didn't rise up and demand this great union. The EU is something that was imposed on each of these countries, which is why Great Britain left. Because it wasn't something that the people of Great Britain said, yeah, let's join this great European superstate. I think what we're seeing with the election in EU, or in France rather, is an election between the globalists who run the EU and who want to run the United States versus the nationalists in France who have said, you know what, we've done it this way for all these years, it's not working. They brought in how many of these migrants from the Middle East. It is
Right.
simply not working. You've got terrorist attack after terrorist attack. You've got migrants running wild. I read something somewhere. One of these EU bigwigs was talking about every woman will have to wear a headscarf, a hijab, in order to not be Islamophobic.
Right.
Give me a break. Last I read is that Marine Le Pen is actually ahead in the polls over her competitor. And I find it interesting too, Eric, that from what I understand, all of the major political parties in France lost
Right.
in this last election. All of them have lost, and there's a lot of them that are now gravitating toward Le Pen. And of course, Barack Obama is sided up with her opponent.
Well, it's interesting because there was a word, and I forget who issued the word, that said if Le Pen is elected, that the Jews of France need to leave because life there will change even and become even worse for the Jews who live in France.
I don't know. I tend to disagree with that. I think it'll get worse if the globalist wins, Macron, or however his name is pronounced.
Right.
I think it would actually get worse if he wins, and the reason I say that is because he's all in with the Islamization of Europe. He's perfectly fine with that. And if he wins, there's going to be much more of this immigration coming in from the Middle East. Bringing in more and more and more of these migrants, the same people who are creating no-go zones in France, places where not even the police can go safely, places that are essentially becoming little Muslim enclaves unto themselves. So I think if the other guy wins, I think it will be much worse for Jews. That's just my view from what I've seen.
I agree. Last two topics as we close out this segment. We've got about 5 minutes left. Tax reform and Obamacare.
Yes, tax reform and Obamacare. I tell you what, I am so upset with with congressional Republicans right now, Eric. For 8 years at least, they've been telling us, oh, we're going to get rid of Obamacare. We're going to get rid of Obamacare, and they failed.
Right.
It was like, what good are they? Tax reform. Tax reform is the same thing. We've had all these years to put together a tax proposal. President Trump has a tax proposal. He has a tax plan that's out there that'll benefit everybody in the country. And so what do Republicans do? Why, they give the Democrats everything they ever wanted under Obama. They fund Planned Parenthood. They're funding sanctuary cities. But there's no money for the southern border wall. There's no money, there's nothing in there about getting rid of Obamacare. There's nothing in there about dealing with President Trump's legislative agenda. So, again, I have to ask myself, who are these Republicans in Congress? Who are they working for?
If Obamacare repeal comes back up, are we able to use the nuclear option now that it's been introduced, revitalized, and now used against its originators?
The nuclear option was primarily for judicial appointees, and it was extended to Supreme Court nominees. There's a lot of this. I don't believe that the nuclear option would apply here, but Republicans can take care of a lot of this through reconciliation, which essentially amounts to the same kind of a thing, just a simple majority. So there are ways that they can do this without going nuclear, in my opinion. That's, if the Republicans would realize that, hey, we're the majority now, we won, the Democrats lost, but unfortunately, we don't have a Republican Party, in my view, that knows how to govern. They know how to be a minority party, but that's it. They don't know how to govern as a majority.
Is Paul Ryan the wrong man for the job?
In my opinion, yes.
In my opinion as well.
Yeah, a few years back, I would have said otherwise, but no, I think he's the wrong man for the job. I'd like to see someone like, my congressman, Raul Labrador. I'd like to see him be a Speaker of the House, or anybody. Quite frankly.
What's the real story behind Chaffetz? Chaffetz not
well. Yeah, there has been some speculation that he wants to run for the governorship of Utah. Of course, Maxine Waters and some in what I call the Democrat media complex are putting out this conspiracy theory that he's got some kind of nebulous ties to the Russians. It's Russians. The Russians live in these people's heads, I'm telling you. I think it's something more basic than that. I think he's looking elsewhere. I think he's looking to become quite possibly a governor of Utah, and he can't really campaign effectively for that spot if he's still in the House, and that would make perfect sense to me.
That would. On another note, my good friend, Chief Justice Roy Moore, is running for Senate here in Alabama to displace Luther Strange, the flawed appointee of the philandering governor who stepped down. We will be getting behind Chief Justice Roy Moore on this program, as they are personal friends of mine. So you're going to hear a lot more about this man who will not bend his knee to man.
So he's a good man. I have a lot of respect for him. I would vote for him. I don't care what party he was in.
I agree. The Ten Commandments stands, and he refused to. His position always was, the federal government has no business in the marriage business. It's not in the Constitution. You don't have that right, and therefore to ask me to enforce something that you don't have the right to enforce, I'm telling them, and all he said was, I'm not going to do anything to you if you don't issue a marriage license. That's all. That's all he said, and they try to kick him out for it. And I say, God bless Chief Justice Roy Moore. God bless his wife Kayla. God bless his family. God bless Joe Newby.
Well, thank you. God bless you as well, Eric.
And thank you so much for always being with us. Don't forget, not June, but we'll be back together in July. And we look forward to seeing you to talk about Independence Day and what that means to me and you. Thanks so much for being a part of the program and being such a good friend to us here. Thank you, Joe.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Eric, and I appreciate all you do.
Thank you. God bless you, my friend. And that concludes the Joe Newby Hour and our broadcast day. We'll rebroadcast the 4 hours of our 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. programming all throughout the day until we meet you right back here live in studio. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning Central Standard Time, right here at the Ignatian Nation Broadcasting Network. Join together with over 125,000 people that follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and make your voice heard. Send us your comments and your questions at info@ignitinganation.com. Until we see you back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp, Central Standard Time, we bid you shalom.